Good afternoon, I'm Karen Kozia Phillips. C News is live.
And I'm Nasira Mohammed with sport.
To the top of the news, Minister of Finance Com Imbert says while many would have been calling for government to cut spending further to close the budget deficit in the 2017 fiscal package, that could not have been done, or it would have led to mass unemployment. Speaking at the Trinidad and Tobago Industry and Commerce Post-Budget Forum this morning, Minister Imbert said the next 3 to 4 years is going to be very difficult as revenues from oil is very low. However, government cannot cut its expenditure further.
We're at the point now where if we cut expenditure anymore, there would be a severe economic downturn, and a severe depression. So when I hear people say you should cut expenditure more, what do they really mean? The government is the largest consumer, the largest injector of funds into the system. If we were to cut expenditure to say 42 billion, that 10 billion would come out of the revenue of everybody in this room.
In 2016, government put forward a $63 billion budget. The 2017 package was $52 billion.
We've reached a point where it's very difficult to cut more than we have cut for this year. Now going forward, we'll probably be spending 53 billion, 54 billion for the next 3 or 4 years. So it's a number that Trinidad and Tobago needs to get used to.
And the Minister of Finance is once again urging private sector to step up and dialogue with the government to tell them what is needed in terms of government support. He says diversification is key to moving the country forward, and he's hoping that public-private partnerships can accelerate. Minister Imbert noted that to run the country, funding by one-off sales is an important part of their strategy. This year, he says, they worked with funding from the Phoenix Park IPO and money regained from the Clico bailout, including $4.6 million gained from the sale of their methanol plant. The government deficit, Mr. Imbert says, they are working on reducing with the hope that by 2020, the country will see a balanced budget. And Minister of Finance is once again urging private sector to step up and dialogue with the government to tell them what is needed in terms of government support. He says diversification is key to moving the country forward, and he's hoping that public-private partnerships can accelerate for better. The budget is pushing persons to greater volunteerism. Professor Ramesh Deosaran says it is not as harsh as could be expected in the economic circumstances we face, but it's leaving room and encouraging citizens to do more to help the country. He sees government, civic bodies and citizens together making sacrifices to take the country forward. Marie-Therese Bernard has more.
An SOS budget is what Professor Ramesh Deosaran is calling the recently concluded budget presentation at this morning's Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce post-budget analysis. He notes that it is geared to transformation and growth.
This is an SOS budget, really. The struggle now is for economic stabilization and national security. Transformation and growth will hopefully emerge later through the government's draft Vision 2030 plan.
The professor notes that multi-sectoral support is needed and urges government to establish the accommodation for the required civic partnerships.
For too long and for quite too much, there have been terrible wastage, corruption, and public mismanagement, all leading to an apparent free-for-all spree for crime and criminals who seem to fear neither police, law, or courts, mainly because they feel such institutions have grown quite ineffective.
Professor Deosaran gives 10 points for consideration, joining with the Prime Minister's suggestion of a government accounting office, 2 proposals for placement of best fit teachers at hotspot schools. He says government must take the bull by the horns and strengthen the police service.
Now is the time for the government to take the bull by its horns, stop the quibbling and tinkering with the police service, conduct the performance audit, set up a special task force for quick delivery, and embark on comprehensive police service reforms.
Professor Deosaran says a change in attitude and a move to a less self-serving political policy is needed. The professor notes that implementing the measures in the budget, engaging the population and corporate bodies will do much to bring Trinidad and Tobago to a brighter future. Mary-Therese Bernard, C News.
You're watching the C News Live report at noon. Remember, you can keep up to date with all the latest news on our website at ctvtt.com, or you can check out our Facebook and Twitter pages at C News Live. So Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba and some other islands are bracing for Hurricane Matthew. Our meteorologist Ian Wallace is here to update us on what's taking place.
Thank you very much, Karen. Well, over the weekend, Matthew basically strengthened to a Category 5, a very powerful system. It is now at a Category 4, but it is just a semantics basically in terms of the wind speed. It is overall the effects that will likely be seen not only across parts of Jamaica or currently with the flooding in Kingston, but also the effects as the system begins to churn and move northwards slowly into Hispaniola, affecting the southwest corners of the Dominican Republic as well as Haiti as well. So obviously over the next few days, obviously Hurricane Matthew will be still moving towards the north, currently just about 300 kilometers southeast of Kingston, 400 or so kilometers southwest of Port-au-Prince. It will be closing that gap as we go into the next few hours with winds of 220 kilometers per hour. It is expected to have very little change in intensity as it goes through Tuesday and still moving north at about 9 kilometers per hour. Now the important statistics here will be that violent rainfall. Possibility of a meter of rainfall across in Haiti, about 1,000 millimeters. Out in Jamaica through today and to tomorrow, 250 to 500 millimeters of rainfall. And then into southeast of Bahamas, they're likely maybe see up to half a meter of rainfall as well. So the Hurricane Matthew will begin to affect southwestern Haiti as we go through tonight, and then into parts of eastern Cuba through Tuesday, and then later on Tuesday it could be getting into the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. Now, as I said, the rainfall is going to be the major factor here. Those orange blobs there moving straight between Jamaica up through Haiti into eastern Cuba and eventually reaching the Bahamas. So obviously there's very little change expected even as the system will go over the very high hills of eastern Cuba. So in terms of tomorrow then, there should be at least some improvements generally out towards Kingston, just about some showery conditions there, but the thunder showers will still continue into parts of Haiti through tomorrow and obviously into eastern Cuba with hurricane conditions expected in the Bahamas as well by late tomorrow. So basically that is the recap on what's happening with the Matthew right now, and I'll give you more details as we go through today. Karen.
Thank you, Ian. Caribbean Airlines has cancelled several of its flights to and from Jamaica due to Hurricane Matthew. The airline said it has activated its call-out plan to contact customers traveling on these services. However, customers are advised to keep checking flight information on the website www.caribbeanairlines.com or to contact the Caribbean Airlines call centers. Caribbean Airlines thanked its customers for their support and understanding, but said the circumstances leading to the flight disruptions are completely outside of the control of the airline. Flights cancelled for today include BW036 departing Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International to Norman Manley International, Jamaica, BW011 departing Montego Bay, Jamaica to JFK International, New York, BW017 departing Norman Manley International in Jamaica to JFK International, New York. Several flights for tomorrow are cancelled as well. Well, we've been hearing about the possible damages Hurricane Matthew can cause to Jamaica and several other islands. We now have on the line Damian Mitchell right now to tell us what's taking place in Jamaica at this time. Good afternoon, Damian. What can you tell us about the weather conditions in Jamaica?
Thank you. Weather conditions continue to deteriorate here in Kingston, Jamaica. The island remains under a hurricane warning, which means that hurricane conditions are likely within the next 24 hours. At present, several parishes have been seeing people removing from low-lying and flood-prone areas into evacuation centers, or what we call shelters here in Jamaica. The parish of St. Thomas, which is one of the easternmost parishes expected to be most harshly hit by Hurricane Matthew, has seen more than 700 people across the parish moving into hurricane shelters. Portland, which is also on the east, has also been recording several people moving into shelters. But in Kingston, which is also on the east and is expected to be lashed by Hurricane Matthew, there has been some reluctance and resistance from people in the communities of Port Royal to head into shelters. In fact, the Minister of Local Government was reporting that buses were sent into Port Royal and only 4 of the hundreds of people living there decided to leave and to go into the shelters. There is an appeal for them to move now before the storm begins to affect the island in a more significant way later on this evening. It is packing winds of some 140 miles per hour. Although the center of the storm will not pass directly over Jamaica, it is going to be expected that Jamaica will get tropical storm force winds, which will be slightly lower than those of hurricane force. But what will be the big problem? Buckets and buckets of rain, up to 25 inches of rainfall expected in some parts of the island, 8 to 10 inches in some other parts, and we are expecting sustained rainfall once the system comes a bit closer later on this evening into tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, Damien. We are praying for all our citizens there in our neighboring Caribbean countries. Of course, that's Jamaica. Financial expert Dr. Parasram Singh says the government has made a good decision to sell public assets to generate revenue to close the budget deficit. However, he says what government has proposed is not enough. Government is expected to make $4.1 billion in revenue with the sale of assets as opposed to the $9.6 initially announced.
In all of that, the one-time revenues, he has only accounted for 4.1 of the 9.6 he's going to generate, according to him, in one-time revenues. So there is still a gap of about $5.5 billion to be articulated to the citizenry as to where these one-time flows are going to come. I suspect the intention is to generate flows from the sale of some CLICO assets, and that might be fraught with and subject to legal issues as we go along.
He explained it seems the budget deficit is $11.5 billion as opposed to the $6 billion as was said by the minister, since $5.5 billion is still needed to be found.
What do you do in that kind of situation? You sell off some of your assets, which is what is being done, and I think rightfully so, and you try, as we ought to put some measure of control on the extent of borrowing and debt that we are getting ourselves into. I think the balance, everybody can argue what should be the balance. But the fact is that the balance lies in divestment, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, measured borrowing.
The CEO of the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Chamber, Dr. Nax Driver, says the $48 to $50 range for oil, as predicted by the Minister of Finance during his 2017 budget presentation, is reasonable. But now government must be willing to make changes if the price changes.
Getting the price right for oil taxation is not as important as it was a few years ago, because it actually produces a lot, significantly less revenue than it did a while ago. So if you get it out by a little bit, it's not quite as important as it may have been in the past. But it obviously is still important, and it's not just the oil prices, it's also the gas prices, because we're a gas economy. Oil is important still, but gas is the most important part of the economy.
And some economists have been saying the government should have put the price of oil between $30 and $40. But Dr. Driver doesn't agree. He said oil is not as important as before. However, he noted the future price will depend on the OPEC meeting set to take place next month.
Really why the Minister of Finance is referencing what's happening in Saudi Arabia is he's sort of saying, look, don't complain too much here in Trinidad that your taxes are going up a little bit, and diesel prices are going up a bit, because even in the world's biggest, well, actually it's not the biggest oil producer now, the US is now bigger than Saudi Arabia, but the market which has dominated oil for the last many decades and has made, has trillions of dollars in reserves. Even they are having to go through some quite significant structural transformations in response to this low oil price environment.
Well, based on the budget presentation last Friday, we asked, are you satisfied with the proposal made by government? Here's what some of you had to say. Crystal Balkisoon said she isn't satisfied at all. And similar sentiments were expressed by Riaz Khan, Christine Ramlochan and Rennie John. Anne Arundel said she was satisfied with the government's proposals. And Trevor Joseph said the simple answer to the question is yes. And remember, you can join the discussion on our Facebook page at CNews Live. TNTech has launched an electronic bill service starting September 30th, so all customers can sign up for e-bills to receive an emailed bill summary based on their existing bill cycle. Customers will also be able to pay their bill online using TNTech's secure customer web access portal. In a statement, the Commission said switching to e-billing will mean no more missed due dates and no risk of disconnection due to non-payment, since customers will no longer need to wait to receive a paper bill in the mail. Those already registered for TNTech's automated credit card payment will still have their bill paid automatically on the due date or can make their payment online as a single transaction. 16 foreigners and 4 Trinidad and Tobago nationals were arrested during a routine patrol along the Los Iro beach on Sunday morning around 4:30. 7 Venezuelans and 9 Cubans were intercepted in a secluded location along Los Iro beach. The Venezuelans, along with 30 sheep and 2 outboard boat engines, were in a 23-foot pirogue, while the 9 Cubans, along with the 4 locals, fluent in Spanish, were in a minibus parked nearby along the shore. The vehicle was also well stocked with food items. According to the TTPS, preliminary investigations revealed that the Cubans were expected to board the pirogue with the food items after the sheep were offloaded. The vessel was destined for Venezuela. The Counter-Trafficking Unit, Immigration Division, Customs and Excise Division, and the Ministry of Agriculture were contacted. And now Nasira Mohammed is here to tell us what's to come in sport. Nasira.
Well, big news in boxing, Karen. Tyson Fury, who is the defending world champion, has called it quits and retired. Okay, now time for sports. Parasram Singh crushed a challenge from recently retired international umpire Peter Nero to retain his post as president of the Trinidad and Tobago Umpires and Scorers Council. Singh of the Northeast Zone of the Trinidad and Tobago Cricket Board defeated Nero 31-5 at the annual general meeting of the TTUSC, which was held on Sunday at the National Cricket Centre in Balmain, Vancouver. Shahid Alaham, principal of the San Fernando TML Primary School, was returned unopposed as vice president of the national organization, while Anne-Marie Charles was also voted in without a challenge for the position of secretary. Also elected by an overwhelming majority of the TTUSC members were experienced administrator Lalman Cowlessa and David Hunt, who both gained 31 votes as executive members. Lorna Kirby Allen of Tobago also emerged victorious on the winning slate as an executive member with 19 votes. World heavyweight champion Tyson Fury says he has retired from boxing and an expletive-laden message on Twitter. The Briton withdrew from a rematch with Ukrainian Vladimir Klitschko scheduled for October 29th because of reported mental health issues. Fury, who holds the WBA and WBO titles, faces a hearing in November into a charge of an alleged doping violation. He tweeted, "Boxing is the saddest thing I've ever took part in," adding, "I'm the greatest and also retired." Fury had been scheduled to earn the biggest purse of his career for his second fight with Klitschko at the Manchester Arena this month. He postponed the original match against the Ukrainian, which was scheduled for July, after injuring an ankle in training. He has been given 10 days by the World Boxing Organization to provide detailed reasons for his second withdrawal. And on to news of golf now. The United States dominated the final day singles to win the Ryder Cup for the first time since 2008, beating Europe 17-11 at Hazeltine. Trailing 9.5 to 6.5 after the first 2 days, Europe looks set for a Medina-style comeback when they led in 7 of the 12 single matches. But the hosts turned the tide, Patrick Reed defeating Rory McIlroy in an epic tussle for the first of 7 US wins. Ryan Moore beat Lee Westwood on the 18th green for the decisive point. It was a particularly sweet victory for US captain Davis Love III, who was in charge 4 years ago at Medina when Europe won despite being 10-4 down on the second afternoon. For Europe, who failed in their bid to win the Cup for an unprecedented 4th successive time, Darren Clarke will come under the sort of scrutiny associated with a losing skipper. However, Clarke could have no control of the Americans' superior putting on Sunday, and the whitewash the US handed out in the first foursomes, or the fact that all 12 of the US team delivered a point while 4 Europeans drew blanks. No, 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 that was the exclamation from Lewis Hamilton when his engine blew up with him comfortably in front and well on course for a victory in the Malaysian Grand Prix earlier Sunday morning. With 14 laps remaining in the race, disaster struck for Hamilton, who had to retire and watch as Red Bull's Daniel Ricciardo claim victory, his first since August of 2014.
Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton have dominated Formula One this season, so much so their Mercedes team could win the Constructors' Championship in Malaysia. They started from the front of the grid, but their plans were put in a spin when Rosberg was hit by Sebastian Vettel's Ferrari. Down to last place, but not out, Rosberg surged back through the field, and he wasn't afraid to batter his way through. That move on Kimi Raikkonen took him up to 4th place. Up front, Hamilton was on course to regain the championship lead, until this happened. Oh no, no! His engine up in smoke, and quite possibly his title hopes. That handed victory to Red Bull's Daniel Ricciardo ahead of teammate Max Verstappen, and a vital 3rd place for Rosberg. It wasn't quite the taste of success he'd hoped for, but a 23-point championship lead isn't to be sniffed at. Nick Parrott, BBC News.
Well, that's it for sport for today.
Ian Wallace is back to tell us what the weather is looking like for Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, thank you, Karen. Well, obviously, it's a drastic change from what's basically across in the Central Caribbean, but Hurricane Matthew is not affecting Trinidad and Tobago, but we're still likely to see a few showers popping in and out, which again are unrelated to Matthew. Basically, there's some moisture around, some upper-level conditions as well, favorable for possibility of some thunder showers developing. Right now, we do have sunshine across central Trinidad, Piarco, 32 degrees Celsius as of 11 o'clock, and 31 degrees Celsius out in Crown Point. But that heat will likely trigger a couple of the showers coming through the afternoon, especially favoring the western half of Trinidad. And there's a possibility of you seeing hearing a rumble or two, and the possibility also of a heavier thunder shower, possibly around the western half of Trinidad throughout the afternoon. But overall, we should be seeing mostly settled weather, at least for tonight, and then into tomorrow, Tuesday, and possibly into Wednesday, a few showers coming and going. So for those of you heading offshore, still a slight to moderately choppy, 2 meters to the Caribbean and the Atlantic, east-northeasterly swells of 8 seconds. And for sailors, you'll be noticing those easterly winds of 50 knots, bringing some whitecaps and also some spray. There's a new moon about, so you could be seeing some spring tides action here. You're looking for your low tide, which had just occurred, and you have your high tide at 5:30 p.m., then your low tide at midnight. So that's how the local weather is looking, and I'll keep you updated not only on this weather, but also on Matthew as we go through the day. Karen?
Thank you, Ian. Now here's a look at what's happening in and around the Caribbean.
The Caribbean Public Health Agency has reported that positive Zika cases confirmed by laboratory testing represent only the tip of the iceberg. This means the number of confirmed Zika cases published in the media is only a small number of infected persons who were tested and confirmed as positive or having the disease. Executive Director of CAFA, Dr. James Hospitalis, said reported figures are only laboratory confirmed positive cases and do not represent everyone who has been infected. Drug enforcement officials reportedly intercepted cocaine in a shipment of dried coconuts at the international airport in St. Lucia on Sunday. The cocaine was detected in the coconuts moments before it was loaded onto a flight destined for the United Kingdom. According to the information received, the cocaine was detected during an inspection of the produce by drug enforcement officials. It is not clear how much drugs were found and whether the shipper was questioned or arrested. Guyana says gold production remains on track to surpass the 555,000 ounces being projected for this year. It said production at this stage is 94% more than it was at this time last year. Natural Resources Minister Raphael Trotman said in mining they are doing relatively well, noting that gold declarations for the first quarter of the year stood at 161,900 ounces. He is estimating that gold production could reach 600,000 ounces this year.
Well, that brings us to the end of the CNews Report at noon. CNews, powered by our team of journalists and producers across the Republic and the region, on television, radio and online.
CNews, your country, our job.